and welcome to Move the Needle, another episode. This is now on the Live All Good TV channel. That's correct. That is with Traverse TV. It's going to be on YouTube. It is audio is going to also be on Anchor, Google, Spotify, all those places. My co-host with the most, Jr. Ford. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
Hey man, we are just rolling along, rolling along. It feels like it's been forever since we've done a show, but it was just literally a month ago. So
I know. A lot has happened, you know?
I'm telling you, man, we're just but hey, Move the Needle is here with you. We want to be a staple for information for you to challenge yourself, folks.
We're
So
back.
we got a great show. We got a great show. We have a guest tonight, by the way. Well, not tonight. Depending on when you're watching, tonight in the
Yeah.
morning, whatever time you're watching, we have a guest. So I want to kind of let me bring up her bio here. This is our guest, Eboni Johnson. Um, I was gonna read this, but I think our audience can read it. And Jr., if you're cool with it, man, I want to bring her on right now so she
Yeah.
can, because there's some things that she will be expanding on that
Yep.
are in her bio here. So without further ado, we are bringing on Eboni Johnson. Hello, Ebony. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are y'all today?
We are good.
Awesome.
Uh-oh. Hold on.
I'm here. I'm here.
Oh,
All
okay.
right.
I was
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
couldn't hear you. Good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Ebony, thank you for being here.
Of
Um,
course.
so I just wanted to touch on a few things. People can see your bio here, and I will go
May
to there
I
is
may I just step in for a minute and say that not everybody might be able to see what's on the screen
sure, sure.
if they
So
are, blind or visually impaired or whatever.
very true, very true. So for that, and for anyone who might be listening to this, I'm going to go ahead and read your bio. So, Ebony Johnson is a reference and instruction librarian, for Oberlin College Libraries. You are published in several research articles, publications, and presentations. Your research is not limited to, but has focused on various things, including access and preservation through digitization, and creating frameworks to help underrepresented people be more visible in library and archival collections. Before we get to those things, because I got something to ask, uh,
Okay.
I want to move on here. You are also a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. You are
I
a blogger.
am.
You are an avid knitter. You are also my favorite Madam Councilwoman of Oberlin.
Here you go.
And you are a posse mentor. So
Wow.
let me go ahead and come out here full screen so we can enjoy our guest. Ebony, thank
Yes,
you. Thank you for
sir.
joining us.
Of course. It's my pleasure. My first
Um
time on a podcast. You believe that?
uh,
What?
wow. Well then, hey, we really appreciate it that
Yeah. Well, you're first,
yeah, that's a good thing.
and
We'll have
hopefully
to
not
have
your
you back.
last. Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
have to have you back for sure.
For
I
sure.
love the part of your librarian skills and your overall arc, if you will, of being a librarian. Um, so I want to set the table real quick before I actually talk about the archiving and the digitization, that kind of thing.
Sure.
You guys know about the movie Nope right now.
I
So,
can't wait to see it. Let me tell you
well,
what,
I
when I first
oh
saw the trailer, this
yes,
this was a few months ago. So I first saw the trailer. I'm like, oh, Jordan Peele's got a new one. Let's see what
you
it's
were
about.
like Nope.
And I'm like, nope. And now I know exactly why he called it that. But I can't wait to go and experience it. I've got a group of friends who like to watch horror and scary
Nice.
movies.
Oh,
So we're gonna
nice.
go together as
Nice.
a group and watch
Well, we
Very
won't give
cool.
too many spoiler alerts then for it,
it together. Okay.
Well, I
but
haven't seen it either. So.
oh, well, that makes three of us.
Oh, okay.
But I've
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
read
Okay.
quite a
Okay.
bit about it. And it really the part I will try to talk about it without doing any spoiler alerts. The two main characters, Kiki Palmer and Daniel Kaluuya, is that how you say his name? Right?
Yep.
Close.
Kaluuya. Yep.
Kaluuya. Their characters are their ancestry is part of what I'm talking about. So back in the, let's call it 1800s, right? There were black jockeys and black men who raised horses and that kind of thing and made money off it, made a good living off of it. But we don't know who they are because their names have been lost with history, whether it's anecdotal, whether it's, records. I mean, that stuff is lost. So we don't know really who's who. That is what really, like, I wanted to talk about. I know that's not maybe your main thing, or it is. Okay, awesome.
It could be family history, right? I've been sort of working on my own family history for probably over 10 years now, off and on.
Wow.
The real time sink, right? But that's
so
absolutely
speak
true.
to that. Speak to the first, I guess, is why do you think the digitization and archival aspect is important?
So we don't get lost, right? I know in my own experience and when trying to research my family history, I can only get so far with what I know and based on the people, my own ancestors who are still alive, which are fewer and fewer now, right?
Sure.
So like having heard the stories and all that, but like looking into the record, looking at census records, looking at newspapers, looking at any scrap of thing that I can find, at some point there's a brick wall that many of us of African descent cannot get. And so there's this big whole thing called slavery, during which Black people, African descent people, if they were accounted for in any way,
it was a transaction,
right? So there's no name. You might see like, oh, there's a 47-year-old female mulatto.
Yeah. Who is that? Right.
We don't know. And so that it's important to kind of preserve as much as we can and make it as available as possible so that, down the line, when my nieces and nephews are researching our family history, like they'll have something that, oh, Auntie found this and saved it and made it available for us, but maybe for other people too, right?
And it's all in one place. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's super important to kind of think about like, not just right now, but like what later.
Yeah.
So I have another question. I didn't want to cut you off, JR, if you want to jump in, but
yeah. I just wanted to just kind of bring up. I think that I've done a little, a bit of kind of the family history research as well, and from the circles that I have, or shows and kind of media and other podcasters who have probably done some related research, I hear typically of the brick wall being 1870, because that before that point, we were not free. Enslaved Africans were not free, so we weren't thought of as human beings. And wasn't until that point that they started to think about the government at that point had started to think about how do you count newly freed people and how do you value them,
who technically like didn't exist before this point, but also like there's a whole lot of census records, and I don't remember now if it's 1880 or 1890, like are lost in a fire. I forget like where they were stored. But if you're looking at census records, there's going to be a gap because you're going back so far, and all of a sudden, like there's no
just no record of
for this particular census. And I wish I could remember which one.
I remember
80
Yeah.
or 90. But that's another hurdle
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of hard to get around. So there's,
Yeah.
slave schedules, and I know people here in Oberlin who've been working on their own family histories for like 30, 40 years. And so they
Yeah.
know some of the tricks of kind of, bridging those gaps, but it's not an easy thing to do at all.
Yeah.
Sure,
And
sure.
I just had one follow-up. I had a question
Go for it.
1B to that. So
Absolutely.
because this is related to my research and kind of my novice experience in familial history, research and genealogy, I came upon, it might have been the 1880 or 1890 census that had already been cataloged in Ancestry, and I found a potential family member that it said that they were bound to this family. And I tried to look it up and try to figure out, well, what does bound mean in the census?
Yeah,
Where they
that was my
were,
question. Is that like
yeah.
servitude, like as in indentured
I,
servant, or
well, I think, and before you
yeah?
answer, Ebony, the way I interpreted it was this child was given to this family possibly for a better future than what the parents or the caregivers had had in store for them, and that was my interpretation. Or it could be, some type of indentured servitude. But it was really interesting that, was this kind of an adoption of this child into this family so they could have a better future, or was it some type of debt that was being paid off?
I gotta be honest with you, I have never encountered that anywhere in the research
Yeah,
that I've done for my particular
it
family.
was pretty alarming. I've never seen the word bound associated with a human being in
In
the
in
census,
I was gonna say in an
yeah,
official record.
in an
That's
official record.
I wonder
wow.
if you could go to or contact the U.S. Census Bureau or
Yeah,
the
it was just
National
fascinating.
Archives and
Hmm.
Records Administration and see if
Yeah,
any of them know what that possibly could have meant.
yeah,
Or if
it was
that's in
fascinating.
any,
Yeah,
or if it's in any other records with any other people.
yeah,
If it was
yeah,
used once, I can imagine it's been used other times.
maybe. But it was just really
Hmm.
fascinating that I found that potentially associated with my 3 times or 4 times great grandfather, for
Mhm.
example, but yeah, sorry, go ahead,
Wow.
Lee. Yeah,
I
just
could talk
fascinating.
about family history and
I know.
genealogy research forever. Just, kind of the interesting things that I've come across with, talking to my elders who,
Hmm.
so I have a particular challenge in my family tree, right?
Hmm.
And so I've been trying to research a lot of my biological father's family, who I never knew until I
Hmm.
was in my 30s, right?
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I was 27, I think, when I met him face to face for the first time, and in my 30s when I met his older sisters, right?
Hmm.
And so they
Wow.
were telling me stories about their, I don't know, remember now if it's their great grandfather or great great, but he was an enslaved man in his
Hmm.
younger life, I guess. And they were in Virginia, and I think Virginia is also a little bit peculiar when it comes to slavery. But at some point, this man, I call him Old Man George.
Hmm.
No, is that the right one? I'm getting my ancestors mixed up.
Well,
Anyway,
I'm
this
I'm seeing
particular
why we need it to
person,
be archived now.
yeah, see? So he and his mother were in Virginia, and I think if I remember right, there was something in Virginia that at some point um,
Hmm.
enslaved people had like a year to leave the state and go somewhere else.
Hmm.
And if they didn't leave within that time, they could be re-enslaved. Anyway, at some point, he and his
Wow.
mother got separated, and
Hmm.
he ended up in Arkansas. And so I've got some family roots in Arkansas, Louisiana, Missouri.
Hmm.
Um, but the legend has it that he was a rider on the Pony Express.
Hmm.
This must have been a great, I don't know. But
Yeah.
anyway, his name, I think that as everyone knew, he became George Andrews. So
Mhm.
that was not his
Yeah.
original name. So that would be my great grandfather, I think.
Yeah.
So anyway, his name became George Andrews along the way. Nobody knows
Hmm.
how or when or who George Andrews was. Like, was he named after somebody? Like,
Yeah.
nobody knows. And so his original name apparently was something like Loudy Chastain or something like that. But how do you spell that? There's so many like different ways that you can put letters together to make sounds that sound like that.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
then like how are you going to try to find it in the record? Because if he was enslaved before he became George Andrews,
Mhm. Yeah. Where do you even begin
I have no
looking
idea.
for
So I
yeah.
talk to old man George in my head periodically, like, man, like I'm doing my best to try to find you in history and like
Lead me.
do what
Yeah,
I can to try to
Yeah.
tell your story because I only know what my aunties told me. Um,
man.
Well, that
but
brings
it,
up an interesting question that I've I've run into as well. Is you're trying to piece together this puzzle that
Mhm.
doesn't have probably two-thirds of the pieces that you have. So I've had to kind of make some educated guesses on, hey, I've seen, a cluster of, my last name is Ford. I've seen a
Mhm.
cluster of Fords in, for example, in Augusta, Georgia, and in the 1930 census, and I didn't see them in the census for another 20 years, and they
Hmm.
were in the DC census.
Hmm.
Or I've ran into, kind of misspellings like you've highlighted, Ebony, where there are different spellings of the last name, but you can make some, inferences that they probably were either misspelled because the recorder didn't take it down correctly, and it might not show up in the digital archive as the same name as yours, or something
Mhm.
I
super
have an
similar.
example of that. So
Yeah.
my father's mother, her name was Florence. And so I found her in a census record. I can't even tell you what year it was, but I found the
Hmm.
family. I was like, oh, cool, cool,
Mhm.
cool. And her name was spelled Florence, Flarrance, but they're down south. So they're spelling with the accent that they talk with. So not the
Yeah,
Florence that we would probably do nowadays, but they
sure.
Yep.
spelled it like they heard it. So Florence. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense now. But like you can't kind of come at those archival and historical records with our
Right.
21st or 20th
With the
century
exact
thinking caps
spelling or the
on. You have to
exact
be a little
yeah.
bit flexible, be a little bit willing to, think outside of the box and figure out some other stuff. But like there's things
Mhm.
that you can find that are concrete more or less, right? Sometimes you
Mm.
can find a birth date and or a death
Yeah.
date. But the
Yep.
hard part is like what happened in the middle of that.
Mm.
Yeah.
I can find a birth certificate for my grandmother. I
Yep.
absolutely know her death date. And there's a lot of her life that I knew.
Mhm.
And I'm talking about my maternal grandmother. Again.
Yeah.
Um, but it's hard to dig around and find out more about what happened in that middle part between birth. And that's,
Mm.
harder for Black people and not white people. We'll just say it that way.
That's
Um,
true.
or maybe
Yeah.
people who, even if they're white, maybe people who weren't of means, right, to be
Mm.
Yeah.
To,
important enough,
to
right,
be
to be written
to
about
be on
in
record.
newspapers,
Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah.
And so
Well, Ebony,
it's a whole situation, but it's a fun
the
puzzle to try to figure out.
that leads me to another question, which you have done some interesting work and research with. A few months ago, oh gosh, I almost a year ago, to be honest, we did an audio podcast on sundown towns, and drowned towns.
Oh yeah.
Okay, remember that, Jr.
Yep,
So,
I do. Yep.
Ebony and I were talking pre-show, and there is a town in Alabama called Africa Town.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So
Have you heard of Africa Town?
I know about it. Yes. Yep.
I had not heard of it until we
Oh,
spoke of it.
oh man. Oh,
Yeah, this was
well-
like 2 hours ago, right?
Oh. like there's
So,
so much
Ebony,
to talk about.
yeah. Ebony, can you talk about some of the work? Because I want to get to something else that you've done while being on council, but can you speak to us about the work that you've done with Africa Town?
Yes, but it's going to take a while because this is a story. Like I gotta provide some context,
Well,
You
no,
got
hold
time.
on.
some history.
No.
But yeah.
We won't do the whole thing, because what we're gonna do is
Oh.
we will do a whole new episode on Africa Town itself. We will definitely cover that. So
Okay.
for this
So give us
one,
like a snippet. Give us a
yeah,
snippet.
give us the
Yeah.
snippet and how your archival and digitization kind of fits in with Africa Town.
A
If you could do that
snippet.
snippet, yes. If
Okay.
you can. Because we are going to do a whole
First of
episode.
all, tell me what y'all know about Africa Town.
Floor is
So
yours.
I've listened to some other podcasts lately. I'm just saying. I just listened to some other podcasts. But I've listened to there's a National Geographic podcast called I think it's oh gosh, it's about digging into the depths, I believe, or there's a podcast from National Geographic that focuses, I think it's like a 6 episode series, but it focuses on the Clotilda and the research team that has dedicated their time, both I think it's at the federal and at the state level, to finding the remains of the Clotilda, which is the recorded last remaining slave ship to land on U.S. soil. Is that correct, Ebony? How
That's
I'm
correct.
picturing it?
The
Okay.
the
And
important part of that is that
Mhm.
happened after the transatlantic slave trade
Right.
was
That's right.
ended,
Yep.
right?
Yep. That
And
is
so
true.
the way I understand the story, I wasn't there in 1856
Yep.
or whenever it happened, but the way the story goes is there's two men in Mobile and met. I think they were in a bar.
Mm-hmm.
One of them bet the other one that he could bring a slave ship of enslaved African people from the continent of Africa to the US without getting caught. And basically that's what happened. So there was a whole effort there to find a captain, and I don't know if they built a ship or tried to retrofit a ship to hold human cargo as opposed to whatever other cargo it was built for.
Yep.
But they did that and brought those people. I think there were 110 of them, men, women, and children, from what is now Benin, West Africa, to southern Alabama. And so those people obviously were trying to pull chocks and get out of here and go back. But were unable to do so. So they and their descendants settled there in Africa Town, which has now been kind of incorporated into the city of Mobile. I think it's about, I don't know, 2 or 3 miles away from downtown. So
Yeah,
over the
that's what I
years,
read.
it's right on the water. There's a lot of industry that has moved into that part of the state over the years and decades. And so they have been sort of inundated, I guess we will say, with the air, soil, and water pollution allegedly being created by all of this, paper industries and all kinds of other things. So to get to my part, I'm getting there.
It's all good. It's all good.
A professor at Oberlin College back, I think, in 2014 went to the tar sands healing walk, and I think that was in Canada, right? And so there were indigenous people and people from kind of all over, kind of working together to fight for environmental justice or whatever. So she met up, I think, happenstance really, with some elders from Africa Town who were trying to figure out how to fight um, the installation of a pipeline
Mm.
on school property,
Wow.
Wow.
right? Crazy. And so my professor friend, she's all, hey, how can we help? And so, they kind of created a relationship, built a relationship. And so my friend Jay Fiskio, who maybe we'll be able to get her on the show about this in the future, but working and bringing her students, she teaches environmental studies. And so I forget the exact name of her class. I think it is environmental justice and local knowledge, but really about how local, indigenous, native people are, kind of fighting for environmental justice on the local level, grassroots kind of efforts to fight
Okay.
climate change and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So she's been taking groups of students down periodically to, do research and do health surveys and about all of the pollution. Let me jump back a minute. Chronic health issues have been documented amongst the people who live there, right? And it's
There's also,
predominantly Black.
and they
No
also
question.
have they had a, I don't know if it's still there, but they have a lawsuit as well.
Right. Right. And I'm
So
sure I can't speak authoritatively on that. I'm betting there has been more than one, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, from what I read.
And so bringing students down to try to do research and help the residents kind of fight back against these major industrial polluters, basically. And so, as part of some of the work that she was doing and talking to the residents, they had expressed an interest in wanting to document their history. And there's been big boxes of photos and newspapers and records, receipts from, all kinds of stuff that were just stashed in boxes in different places around town. And so she actually applied for, I think it was an NSF grant to work on like being able to help them do that, but also document orally and do oral history. So I went down to, participate in an oral history workshop, talk about how to do it, why it's important, best practices, and actually start the process of recording these histories, especially from the elders. There are women and men down there I've met who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and they can talk about what Africa Town was like when they were growing up or whenever they moved there from wherever they came from. And, talking about just looking like snow. There was so much ash and stuff falling from the sky.
Wow.
But part of what I did too is take some of those documents, work with the students to kind of group them together by like item, set up a nomenclature and a database, scanning them and like capturing all the metadata. So like, what is this thing? Give me some names, some dates, birth dates, death dates, anything that we can kind of. So we started with the funeral programs because there was a stack of them. They're all the same, kind of easy to classify them, figure out the important pieces of data. So all of that is going into an online archive, which is not ready for public view yet, but the documents, the oral histories, it's all kind of an ongoing process to help out Africa Town essentially tell its own.
Nice.
Wow.
Well, so this is something. Excuse me. Once you kind of that doesn't, not that that has to be ready for public view, but once the archive for Africa Town, I guess gets rolling, right? Really starts picking up steam with um the actual archiving of everything. This is
Mhm.
something that you could take around the country and around the world with different things, Um, again, I mean, I mentioned the episode we did almost a year ago about sundown
Sure.
towns or drowned towns. Everybody knows about, well, Lake Lanier, right? And everybody calls Lake Lanier that it's haunted because they literally, flooded a town. And people wonder why so many uh,
That's horrific. That's horrific.
people wonder why there's odd accidents on Lake Lanier, and there's a reason. But I mean, there's so many missing pieces, as you guys have literally put in talking about your own research of your own families. I
Sure.
could add mine too. There are so many missing pieces. This is a that's why I wanted to bring that to light. That everybody, especially your skill set, is amazing for this. The research, the actual being able to categorize and come up with a system that it can work to archive this. Um,
I'm
yeah, go
gonna
ahead.
apologize because, like, for some reason, I cannot remember the web address for the digital archive, and I should have had my act together in advance. I apologize that I didn't, but I will get that to you, so
Yeah,
that at least you can see what is available for
sure.
public view and learn a little bit.
I would say when you
Awesome.
get it to me, I can add it into show notes. I can
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
add that. Um,
Yeah,
I so I do want to talk about something else too.
sure.
Um, since you are Madam Councilwoman, I love saying that.
That's never gonna get old, is it?
Nope.
No, it never will, because I'm so proud that you are on the city council. I love it. I
Thank
love it.
you.
But the one thing that so again, JR and I did a podcast. I think it was either last month or a few months ago, when we were talking about Juneteenth, and we were talking about um, the monetization of it. And that was around the same time as the Supreme Court ruling on overturning the Roe v. Wade. So there is something that I know that you did on council. Can you speak to the resolution that you were part of, that you did with council, about that? If you could speak to that, please.
Absolutely. And did I send you the link to that?
You did. You did. I have
Okay.
that. Hmm.
Cool, cool, cool. So I guess this started for me in May, actually, when the leak about the leak
Mhm.
When they said, "Oh,
happened.
we might make this decision, but no, we haven't decided yet." Sure.
Yeah, the leak about the leak.
Mhm.
So I kind of got revved up, and it's just one of those things that you just kind of gobsmacked that something like that could actually happen in
Yeah. Yeah.
2022, right? In
Yeah.
the United States of America. So
And
I
yet
started
here we
doing
are.
research because I'm like, and I remember I was sitting with some friends in a restaurant, and I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm going to write a resolution, right? And mind you, I just got elected to city council last November, and I started my term on January 1st. Officially, I got sworn in on January 3rd. So I'm like 6 months into this thing, not even 6 months.
Mhm.
I'm gonna write a
Yeah.
resolution. This is ridiculous. So I started doing some research to see what other cities around the country have
Mhm.
maybe made some statements, sent
Mhm.
some press releases, written resolutions. I'm like, oh, okay. So I started making a list. There's like Atlanta and Beverly Hills and California. I have a whole list somewhere that I don't have in front of me, but there were several of
Sure.
them just kind of right
Yeah.
after that happened. And so I was like collecting newspaper articles and getting links. I'm like, if I can find the actual um, legislation, then I can like
Sure.
kind of see what was in that because your girl is new. She's never done this before.
Yep.
But I knew from talking to other city council members, like, that's a great idea, and
Mhm.
we'll be here to support you. I'm like, cool. So, I think after the first initial rush of fury,
Mhm.
right, it kind of cooled down for a little bit just because I had other stuff that needed my immediate attention. But I tell you what, on January 24th, when that thing came down, I got so mad and I came up to my home office. I'm like, it's a Saturday. I'm like, I'm writing a resolution today, right now. And so, I got my coffee, I had some snacks, I got everything I needed to like kind of sequester myself in here and just
Mhm.
sort of pound it out and make sure to put in there the importance of Oberlin's role in
Mhm.
the residents of Oberlin over the years since its founding in 1833,
Mhm.
being a place where people have provided sanctuary to other people for all kinds of reasons. So y'all know Oberlin, it's anti-slavery,
Mhm.
abolition, um, during World War II, like providing sanctuary for Japanese internment students who were facing internment and things like that. And then now in the 20th, 21st century, undocumented students and people, right, undocumented.
Right.
So we have a long, storied history, right,
Long
of the
history.
residents of Oberlin providing sanctuary for lots of reasons. So there's things that we can't do, right? One thing we cannot do is in any way supersede or oppose state law, right? And
Indeed.
so the state law is that abortions after 6 weeks are illegal. So we cannot, be like, oh, hey, come to Oberlin and whatever. But we can oppose the Supreme Court's decision that essentially overturned Roe v. Wade and express our fury with that, I guess, for lack of a better word right now.
Extreme fury,
our
yes.
Condemnation, right? We can condemn that. We can state our support for reproductive rights and freedoms for all people. But the other thing that I think is really important is getting this in front of the state and federal legislators who can do something about it, but also encouraging other Ohio jurisdictions to also follow suit. So I don't know if Oberlin was the first city in Ohio to write such a resolution. I think we might have been. I know that others have come out since then, or I've become aware of some that have come out since then, but I don't know for sure if we were the first. And so maybe if I had my act together in May and pounded this out, like we could have
and not waited till June.
And not waited till June. But I think everything happens when it's supposed to happen. And so the other thing about that is that City Council in Oberlin takes a recess. So after our first meeting in July until the second meeting in August, we're on recess. And so this was June 25th when I pounded this thing out. And I'm sending it out to council president and vice president for input resolutions and working through them with the law director for the city to make sure that everything is kosher, right?
Nice.
But this was June 25th. Our first meeting, our only meeting in July was July 5th. So there was only a matter of a few days during which I was traveling for work, right? And so just kind of in between sessions, I'm checking my email and sending text messages and making revisions because I wanted to be sure to get it on that agenda for July 5th, with all deliberate speed, right? As you said, for Brown versus Board of Education, right? So that was really an important move to make. And I've heard a few things from people. If you watch the video of that council meeting, there is someone who's not an Oberlin resident, but he expressed his displeasure that resolution was even a thing. And I won't go into that, but I've heard some positive feedback from people as well.
That's awesome.
So I happen to be the person who wrote it, and I call it kind of my baby, but it's really not. You know what I'm saying? It's really kind of a work for everybody who.
Whoa! But you know what? That's exactly why I invited you to this show, Move the Needle, because while we talk about it a lot, this is, and I'll be frank, it's a war. And wars are fought on many different fronts. So there's not just the front line. There are many back channels and many avenues. And so that's why I was like so proud of you for sponsoring this resolution, right? And spearheading it. But that is why I wanted to invite you on here, because it's people like you, right? You didn't do it for getting on a show or a podcast. You didn't do it for accolades. You didn't do it for recognition. You did it because it was the right thing to do and you were moved to do it. that's what moving the needle is about. That's everybody has a part to play. So figure out what you can do, right? Like you
Right.
said, okay, you cannot supersede state law. Can't do that. But
Nope.
there's
But
something
we
that you
can
can do.
encourage other cities and towns in Ohio to get on board, right?
And how,
Um,
like, if how many get involved, then oh my gosh, the majority of state, right? Then it's like, oh, the state of Ohio's doing this, then maybe towns in Indiana. And Indiana, I
Right.
mean, wishful thinking, but that's it. All it takes is one. You see?
just a little bit. And I think the
Hmm.
other important thing that I made sure to put in there is how this particular opinion from the Supreme Court, and I worded it almost certainly, right, is going to affect other rights and freedoms. So, like thinking about marriage equality and
Hmm.
access to contraception. And we know this because one of the Supreme Court justices basically came out and said so, right?
That was
And
Justice
so
Thomas. For those of y'all who don't know, that was
you
Justice
right, Justice
Thomas.
Thomas, right?
Yeah.
I
Call
said
it
that
what
in
it
the
is.
I said that in the show before. I put it out there.
Yeah.
Yes, it was
Yeah.
Yes.
Justice Thomas. Mhm.
And so
Clarence
just
Thomas.
knowing that this is, sort of a gateway to other freedoms being potentially stripped away, I think it was
Yeah,
important to say that in words in the resolution. And so
indeed.
this becomes a part of the official record, right?
Yes.
Hmm.
It's been, as a piece of, I guess, legislation,
Mhm.
it's recorded, and in that we authorize the clerk of council to send it off to our Ohio and U.S. legislators,
Nice.
and the governor. I should specifically say our governor is
Mhm.
gonna get a copy of this if he hasn't already. So, like, hopefully, getting this in front of people, I
Yeah.
think, will be really important. And my mother, hi mom, my mother tells me, like, you need to have a meeting with Sherrod Brown, and so
Oh.
uh, I'm gonna
Yep.
put it on my list of things to do to meet with her. Um,
Well, we are touched that you were on our show before your meeting with
Yes.
Sherrod Brown. So we
I'm gonna send
appreciate
him
that.
this too. Shout out to Sherrod
Please do.
Brown.
So, Jr., I don't know if you had any follow-up questions, but if you do, we go with it. If not, we were going to go to break.
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ebony, I thoroughly appreciate you. I know we've only just like scratched the surface, right? Talking about your time on council, talking about what you've been doing as a reference and instruction librarian. You are welcome to stay with us after the break because we're going to talk about the title of the show is actually called Freedom, Finances, and Fried Chicken. So that's the title
Where
of
do
our
we get
show
to
this
the
episode.
finances part? Have we talked
You'll
about
see.
finance?
You'll
Okay,
see.
all
You'll
right.
see. But you're more than welcome to stay for
Yeah.
the second segment when we talk about this because what it is we're kind of demystifying this stereotype of fried chicken. That's what that's about.
Oh, I think I'm gonna have to stay for that.
All right. All right.
If y'all
All
will
right.
have me, I will be happy to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, everybody, you know what? Hang tight. We'll be right back after the break. All right, folks, welcome back. Welcome back from the break. We are still joined by our guest, Ebony A. Johnson. Thank you so much for filling us in on the archiving and digitization of records, uh, genealogy, family history. Thank you for your resolution, for sure. The city of Oberlin appreciates you. I appreciate you as my friend, and thank you for being on Move the Needle for sure.
Thank you for having me. This is fun.
Absolutely. So I want to this is the next topic that we wanted to talk about. We could have split it up into two shows, but because we have you as a guest, I think it's also important because we are going to kind of demystify this stereotype of fried chicken and actually show how it is empowering for black women specifically.
I'm
So
with it. I love to eat it. I love to cook it.
well, that's why I said the title of this episode was or is Freedom, Finances, and Fried Chicken, right? So the article that I'm referencing, this is from, excuse me, from eater.com. Okay. So, fried chicken, everybody loves it. I don't know of anyone who actually does not like fried chicken, but it was first recorded as a food, as a meal, more than 300 years ago. And this is what fried chicken is about, right? The crispy skin, crunchy skin, tender meat, and flavor all the way to the bone. That's what it is renowned for. But here's the question: where did this food begin, right? More importantly, and this is why I want to talk about it, because how often do we hear of this stereotype? Oh, black people like fried chicken, right? And it's slandered so badly. But what is the legacy of the enslaved and later freed black women who actually perfected this southern food, right? So, before we jump in a little bit further, do you guys have anything you want to add or talk about with fried chicken before we move
Actually, yes. So there's a clip that I saw on social media recently, and
on?
I believe it was Alton Brown.
Okay.
Is he on Food Network?
Yeah. hmm
Yeah.
He is
So
on
I
several
guess
shows.
he's on a show about Korean fried chicken. This is what I get from the little clip that I saw, so I don't know the whole like
Sure.
context or whatever.
Sure.
But the chef who was making up Korean fried chicken said something about how it's like the best fried chicken there is. And he's like, basically, you know why, right? And so she's like, no, why? And because the African American GIs like showed them how to do it.
Mm.
So I'm
Thank
like,
you,
okay,
Alton
shout to
Brown.
Alton Brown, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Because like Korean fried chicken is good. It ain't as good as my mom's.
No.
That's
It
right.
ain't as good as
Uh-oh.
mine. I'm just playing. I'm just playing. It's good.
Well,
There's a place for all the fried chicken in
Yeah,
the fried chicken
true.
world.
that's right.
True.
But I just think it was really awesome that he kind of brought it back to the black people.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that because when we go ahead and you know publish this episode on YouTube and Traverse TV on all the platforms, I'm gonna tag him in it. I'm gonna tag him in it because it's talking
Tag him
about
in
fried
it.
chicken. Why not? Right? You
Yeah.
gave him a shout out,
Absolutely.
and he gave fried chicken a shout out. So here is where fried chicken apparently started, right? And it's funny how you guys are talking about the genealogy in Virginia. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say anything in the first segment because I was like, oh, that's a great teaser.
Yeah. It naturally came to this. Yeah.
Exactly, right?
Yep.
So clearly back in the 1700s, fried chicken was a beloved dish of then Governor William Byrd. He actually wrote about it in his diary. Like that's how much he loved fried chicken. All right. So fried chicken, I guess, became official, or as this article says, it was firmly immortalized because it made the third edition of the first American cookbook, The Virginia Housewife. So back in 1828. And I just want to mention, like, that's why I loved when we were talking about the genealogy, because when we start talking about these dates and the times, it's all intertwined. It's not
Yeah.
like it's consecutive, if you will, or concurrent. I mean, it's not like one
Yeah.
after the other. All these things happen at the same time. So while we are talking about the fried chicken, enslaved black women were considered experts. Let me say that again for the people who didn't hear it in the back. The enslaved black women were considered experts in preparing everything that is now thought to be Southern food, including fried chicken. After the Civil War, they understood what that meant, right? That's where your freedom comes in. That's also where your finances come in because
Mm-hmm.
they knew that they could make a sustainable living and have economic freedom by cooking fried chicken. So I'll keep my thoughts to myself at the moment because the stereotype of fried chicken is just ridiculous right now, right?
Well, yeah, yeah. Go
Oh,
go
let me
for it.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Let me come back out. No, go ahead. What you got?
No, I think you were going to get to the reasoning behind the stereotype. So
Oh,
if
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I'll touch on that. So
yeah.
let me go back to our slides here. Um, I hope I don't mispronounce the first name of the author here, but Psyche A. Williams Forson, the author of Building Houses Out of Chicken Legs, she wrote, "Food serves more than its intended function to nourish and satiate. But the trading and selling of these foods for commerce also provided relative autonomy, social power, and economic freedom." So, as we continue with her book was published in 2006, but she also believes, and uh, I laugh here because I kind of agree with her, that not much has changed since the dish was brought to the American South. Not much has changed since the 1700s, people. Just let that sink in for a second. Because, as she says, Africans were frying food well before they came to America. So, when this mechanism, frying chicken, came to the South, it was over perfected by Black women. And she'd done a lot of work. And in her research, what she found was that this tradition was associated with Black women. But what she's concerned about is not what we did with the food that we'd been mocked by. She was more concerned about our resilience with what has gone on. So before we get to this, some notable women, right? I want to come back out here. What are your thoughts so far about us talking about the fried chicken and how it was a vehicle for freedom, including financial freedom for enslaved Black women?
Yeah, I think just in my understanding and education about how the resources that were available to enslaved and formerly enslaved Africans,
Mhm.
that gave them agency, gave them some level of autonomy and freedom,
Mhm.
was kind of flipped on its head. Think about watermelon and how that was, essentially it was an economic driver for,
Mhm.
newly freed enslaved Africans. I think
Mhm.
in the educated, common knowledge of the Black community, we know that watermelon was and continues to be a delicacy that was used to help build families, family
Mhm.
stability.
Mhm.
The same you can say probably with fried chicken,
Mhm.
where it was used as a pivotal economic driver that was ultimately um, used to demean our community because
Mhm.
it was seen as a a means to move themselves up from poverty and from where they, from the dirt and from the ground from which they stood.
Mhm.
So when you see these caricatures of chicken and watermelon, especially during what I think like the vaudeville and early
Mhm.
days,
Yeah.
um, you know, if you think about Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse was not who Mickey Mouse was, who we come to know. But those types of caricatures really painted a broad picture of how white society looked at this economic driver of the Black community, and that has stayed, I think, until this day. I still think about watermelon, and I love watermelon. I have watermelon in my fridge right now, mixed with feta, crumbled feta, and mint, and it is
Oh, you
delicious.
fancy. You
Yeah,
fancy now.
I'm fancy. Yeah.
Well, Jay, I want to piggyback on what you were
Yeah.
saying. Like that, clearly, what I've stated so far is not the stereotype, but as enslaved or newly freed
Yeah.
enslaved people, especially Black women, used it to level the playing field.
Right.
That's when it was then used and flipped on its head to use stereotypes with restaurants and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Ebony, do you want to jump in before we move on? Other than saying that my mom's fried chicken was the best, but
Listen, I love fried chicken.
Are you gonna say that my mama's fried chicken wasn't the best?
No.
That's Pandora's box. That's Pandora's box.
I'm not doing that at all. But I think fried chicken and lots of, soul food has been used to bring families together. Like think about Sunday dinners, right?
Indeed.
After
Absolutely.
church. What's on the table? Probably fried chicken.
Indeed.
Or if it was my house, I might make I think one of my first Sunday dinners that I ever had as, an adult woman, I made fried chicken and waffles.
Nice.
And it's for me, it's like an ultimate comfort food.
Yeah.
Right. So, for me, that's kind of what it is. And I don't actually cook meat very much anymore. I will eat it if I'm out and about, but I figured out I don't really like process meat. So a few years ago, I decided I don't have to do that. But man, if I can get my hands on some fried chicken, and I have gone to get some Korean fried chicken before, this is good. But then I wonder if it was worth it.
You might as well just had
to get some fried chicken that I didn't make, right? Because I know I can throw down in the kitchen. So it's good and everything, but I'm like, ooh, was it really worth it? I could have just made this myself and been ultra satisfied with the experience. But anyway, bringing families together, communities together, comfort food. I think soul food and fried chicken especially is all of that for me personally.
Nice. Well, then let me share with you all. This is how the next part of what we're talking about is notable women, right? Who actually use this to support themselves. And you will notice some similarities of cities. Okay. So these waiter carriers, they were in Gordonsville, Virginia. And back in 1869, writer George Bagby called Gordonsville the chicken capital of the world. Okay. The reason being is because during the Civil War, the Northern Virginia Army transformed a hotel, the Exchange Hotel. It's near a train stop in Gordonsville. They turned it into the Gordonsville Receiving Hospital. During this time, who we just talked about, the waiter carriers, right? Serving the soldiers. They, whoever stopped through the town. So there were two stops on this rail. One of them was Charlottesville. Yeah. Yes. The same Charlottesville
that Charlottesville?
Same Charlottesville. Yes. Gordonsville is about 20 miles from Charlottesville. Okay.
Oh yeah. Yep.
But with the Louisa Railroad back in 1840, that's when they became major stops on this train line. Okay. So when the train came to the station, obviously, the trains were open air back then, right? So they can smell the fried chicken, they smell the baked goods that these waiter carriers that they had, right? And because obviously there were few jobs that were available, I mean that's an understatement. This is from
That's
the
the
article.
understatement of
Yeah.
the century.
That this is from the article. This is not, this is not my writing this.
I
This is
know
from the
you're not
article.
editorializing, but good Lord.
Yeah, that's why I cracked up when I had to put this out there. I was like, wait a minute, because there were few jobs readily available, really? Yeah. But
Yeah.
black women used their culinary skills, and this is how they were feeding their families. So, you know what? Let me come back out here before we get to this part. Um, yeah, like, yes, that Charlottesville, by the way. So, Gordonsville was the chicken capital of the world. We're talking during the, 1830s, 40s, all the way through the Civil War. Um, it was reading this article, and I'll put the article in the show notes as well. Um, it's amazing because it really shows the skill level, right? The culinary skill level of these enslaved black women. It's amazing. But there, I didn't include this piece. There's a piece in the article that I believe the C&O Railroad, sent um, northern journalists on down to write about this, and they wrote in the paper and described as they said, Negroes back in those days, but the different Negroes and ages, but all of the smells, they literally described in detail what they were smelling, and described like the chicken, the eggs, the cakes, the pies. So man,
The
you are
macaroni and cheese, the cornbread, the
Yes, the
greens.
macaroni and cheese.
all
And
of
I was
that
that.
could
just
be
gonna
a
No.
say.
whole episode in itself
Oh yes.
about mac and cheese.
Yep. Absolutely.
So yeah, it was important, but they used this to empower themselves. This was not a stereotype. And even then, yes, okay, we're talking about them being enslaved, right? Or newly freed at some point.
Hmm.
But white people weren't looking at them as like, oh, you like fried chicken. That's a black thing. Man, I know a bunch of Southern folks who are not
Yeah.
black, who love collard greens, who love fried. That's what they were raised on too. So, with this zero sum game, being able to, turn these restaurants around, Mammy's this and Coon something this, you know what I mean? This is BS because it was never that to begin with. Okay, I'll
It
get off the
feels
soapbox
like
now.
it feels like we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. You know what I'm saying? So like if
Yeah.
we
Hmm.
use fried chicken or whatever it is that we
Hmm.
can to try
Hmm.
to improve ourselves, then we're getting
Yeah.
looked down upon for that. But
Hmm.
then if we don't try to use whatever we can to improve ourselves, then we
Why
get
aren't you trying
talked
to
about
improve
for that.
yourself? Right.
Right. And so
Yeah.
it's just like what do you want a sister to do?
Hmm. That well, what she can do is create an archive system that shows the world the truth. That's what she does.
That's
And
right.
then she runs for
She can do
council and she makes a
Yep.
resolution that's like, we're not putting up with this. That's what a
That's
sister
right.
does. Oh,
that's
sorry,
what a
just
sister can do. And she can also fry some chicken on the side. Because
absolutely.
listen, you can't run the world on an empty stomach. You
No.
can't
Indeed.
sorry, not run the world. I'm not sure.
No.
You
It's
can't
so
Ooh,
important to
change the
highlight these
world
things. Yeah.
on an empty stomach. You have to be fully fed and nourished. And that means
indeed.
not just physically, right?
But
But
the
Hmm.
soul.
emotionally,
Hmm.
mentally, financially taken
Yep.
care of, all of those things. And
Yeah.
so if fried chicken is one of those avenues that like
It
feeds my
was.
body, feeds my
Hmm.
soul,
Hmm.
makes me feel like fully myself, cool. I'm gonna go fry some chicken or get somebody else to do it for
Indeed. Indeed. Well, the reason that these waiter carriers kind of went out of business is because of the rail cars, right? When air conditioned cars were introduced, along with a license tax that was imposed in 1879. They were phased out. You know,
So
they were.
by license taxes, do you mean like they had to have licenses or permits in order to like sell their fried chicken or whatever it is
I
they were
So,
doing?
The article did not go into detail, but that was my guess reading it. Because if this was in 1879, that would kind of mean to me that, hmm, we're just in this reconstruction period, which we've talked about on this show frequently. And
oh yeah,
so, oh, I jumped ahead. Sorry. Um, so yeah, that would mean to me that there was some type of license tax that was put on um, waiter carriers, so that the air conditioned cars then they came up with the dining cars and all that because people would have still been like, hey, stop here because I came on this rail for a reason. Again,
Specifically for this. And so now you're like
right.
um, talking down the black woman for frying her
Hmm.
chicken and trying to improve her situation in life. But on top of that, you're going to add taxes or permits, which is cutting
Exactly.
into her
yep,
profit,
yep.
right?
Now that is just my guess. Like I said, the article did not go into detail, and I didn't have time to research it further. But like the way it was written, along with a license taxes that were imposed, that's what it
Yeah.
made me think.
And
Um,
I think you
yeah,
can
go ahead.
probably
Sorry.
associate that with other types of taxes that were imposed in the mid
Indeed,
1800s. I mean,
indeed,
even after slavery, there
the
was the
taxes
poll
on the farmers,
tax.
yeah, or the
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
there were various taxes that
Hmm.
raised or actually put barriers in place for advancement.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. That
and they were probably applied severely
yeah.
to people of color, for
As we've
example.
as
Probably
Where,
we've
more
talked.
so than for other people, right? But I
oh,
was also listening
yeah,
to a book that happens to
Hmm.
be fiction, but one of the
Hmm.
characters was talking about, and she's an older woman, but kind of reflecting back on her life and
Hmm.
her parents being sharecroppers, right?
Hmm.
So
That's what I was getting
what
at. Yes.
happens? You raise the food, and the landowner gets half of it.
And oh, you get half of it, but we also got to tax you for the land that you grew the
And
food on. And
correct, right? And
hmm.
oh, there's
Hmm.
don't forget, the company store, right? So if there's anything you need for you and your family, whatever, yeah, just put it on your tab and we'll take that out of your profit. So
Yeah,
in addition to the half
you get
that
no
we're
profit.
already taking, then I'm
yeah,
just gonna eat away nickel and dime you, right? To
Hmm.
kind of pay up your tab that you've racked up.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I do
We
want
can't
to.
have nice things.
Well, hold on, hold that thought, hold that
All
thought.
right.
But so what remains in Gordonsville today is, and this, I'm not so sure how I feel about this. They do have a plaque with celebrating the first Black female entrepreneurs, and it reads, with the introduction of rail service, enterprising African American women commenced a tradition that was to symbolize Gordonsville forever as the fried chicken capital of the world. Um, so part of me is like, good, right? They acknowledged what that was. But what I also didn't add, and I read further in the article, that the celebrations have kind of come down over the years and they don't really celebrate the Black women as much. They celebrate it being the chicken capital of the world and have these
right.
festivals, but that gets lost. So I was feeling some kind of way about that, especially good old Virginia, you know, where,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So a fun fact. So my roots in Virginia, especially around like the Orange, Virginia, and that's not too far from Charlottesville. So I
Hmm.
have
Hmm.
some deep roots kind of in and around that area, especially Louisa and Caroline County.
Hmm.
where my mom's side of the family is from. So when
Hmm.
you talk about, these originations of parts of our culture that were pretty ubiquitous because, for the most part, Black women were cooks,
Hmm.
throughout slavery. So when we talk
Absolutely.
about perfection of a cuisine, it is from us. It is
Hmm.
from our blood, sweat, and tears from our descendants that we have come to know and love fried chicken. We have come to know and love watermelon. We have come to know
Hmm.
macaroni and cheese, for example. These are all parts of our history that get diluted in a way that doesn't give us the representation and recognition that our culture deserves.
Hmm.
We have constantly and consistently been exploited in a lot of different ways. You talk about food, you talk about culture. Um,
Hmm.
there's not that reciprocity that we get from the advancements in the overall culture that we have contributed to. Whether it's food, whether it's politics, whether it's science,
Inventions.
engineering, and math, all these
All.
different things. It's
Hmm.
a and it's purposeful. That's the other thing is that it's
Yeah.
not on. It's not accidental. This is
Well,
not accidental.
that is why I want to share this with you. This
Hmm.
is what's amazing about this article. So it was not just um, to shine light on what
Hmm.
happened. So originally from Philadelphia, Michelle Wilson opened Ma Michelle's in Richmond in 2015. So she obviously did some research here, as you can see, found out that her grandmother and grandfather were born in Petersburg and Lynchburg. But the cool thing is, you know, this is what she focuses on. She focused her restaurant on Southern cuisine to showcase the dishes that reflect her identity. And these are the things that she watched her family members cook. She cooked them with them, right? And instead of giving in to the stereotypes or what people mock as staple dishes, her restaurant is thriving. And I love this quote from her. She says, I won't separate from my culture. Black chefs are rare and can tell the story now and can change the narrative. So I think like exactly what you were saying, man. Uh, it's a big deal that now, as we begin to uncover the absolute empowerment that
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Black women had, right, and we're starting to find these stories. Um, that's why Ebony, what you do is so important, not just in
Yep.
genealogy, right, but uncovering the story of what our people did and categorizing it, logging it anecdotally, whatever that is, before we lose our elders, because that's it, like that's a black chef who was like, man, now I get to continue that and feel connected. There's
Hmm.
another one I
Yeah.
want to share. Her name is Shane Roberts Thomas. Okay. So she was born and raised in Virginia. She owns Big Mama's Fried Chicken. She says that she feels a connection to these black women who cooked before her and created the foundation for her to be able to run a successful restaurant. She also says in the black community, and I think we all agree with this, cooking is a way of life, right?
Hmm.
So she was like, cook women her age were cooking at a young age. There were no Chick-fil-A's. How did they get along without Chick-fil-A? I'll never know.
Chick-fil-A,
Yeah.
maybe it's not all that good, but that's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole another conversation.
Indeed, indeed. Well, moving on with Chef Roberts Thomas. I love this from her. Right? She says, "I have a fine dining restaurant making money off of collard greens, cornbread, fried chicken, fried fish, and the food we ate growing up. The people before me that paid their dues to allow me to be able to do this, their spirit lives within me. I want to do them justice when I'm cooking." So, like, it's not lost. It's actually celebrated like it should be. And those, again, it's a shame that black chefs are rare, right? But that is true celebration and homage to our ancestors. No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Absolutely. And there are so many like black chefs out there doing work. I put
Yeah.
a link in the chat
Hmm.
to, well, first of all, an article that gets you the video to that clip of Alton Brown that I mentioned,
Ah, okay. All right.
but also to a book called The Cooking Gene, A Journey Through African American Culinary History in the Old South. And it was not
Mm.
written by a black woman, but rather a black man named Michael W. Twitty.
Mm.
And if I had the time right now, I would go on Instagram and get links for all of the black chefs that, kind of I
Yeah.
follow. And some of them, which I'm really happy about, are vegan, right? And so they can
Mm.
post
Yep.
recipes about how to make our traditional favorite soul foods
Yep.
With
in
in a modern way. Absolutely.
right, right. So make them meat and dairy free. And so there's some
Yep.
things, like I
Hmm.
said, I don't usually cook meat in my
Hmm.
house, and there's some things that I have no problem making vegan. I can do a cornbread that you would never know was
Hmm.
vegan, but there's
Yep.
some things that I will not compromise.
I know
Sure.
mac
And
and cheese is
so
hard.
my
Mac
mac
and
and
cheese is
cheese,
hard.
I'm not even going to attempt to veganize my mac and not the
Can't
way
do it.
that I was taught to make it. Like I'm not
Yes.
going to try.
Can't
Yeah.
do it.
And
Can't do
I
it.
tried once making vegan ice cream, which was fine. It tasted good. It didn't have quite the texture that I wanted,
Right.
but
Mm.
like I don't have to
Okay.
do that again. So I made ice cream a couple weeks ago. I'm like, I'm going all in with full fat in this thing.
That's
Yeah.
And
hey, if you're
so
gonna do it, you gotta do it right.
then do it up, right? And so there's a few things that I personally won't even. So if I'm gonna have a Thanksgiving dinner with mac and cheese, I'm making mac
Yep.
and cheese.
And
Period.
you
Full
and if you're
stop.
gonna
End
do
of
it,
story.
if you're gonna do it with fried chicken, you gotta do it right, you
You
know?
got to do it with buttermilk, and you got to soak it
Oh,
overnight, and
ooh, ooh. He said
It's called
which is
buttermilk.
love.
actually not the
That's
way
yeah.
I learned how to make fried chicken from my mom.
Right,
Um,
right.
but it's just something that I have learned over the years, and it's just
Yep.
really good. But
Well,
I can
that's
do some fried oyster mushrooms, fry them up like chicken, and it has a
the
similar
texture,
texture.
Oh.
huh?
So, mhm.
Oh, well, but so as we're concluding our episode here, the cool thing is this, and this is what the article pointed out. This is the point of it, that the impact of black women in the culinary space extends far beyond the single dish of fried chicken and needs to be acknowledged. It is clear and it's evident to us, and hopefully it's evident to anyone who has listened or watched this episode. But it's clear that their hands have touched every facet of what we consider American food.
Yep.
Yet their achievements aren't really spoken about or celebrated, or even celebrated to the same degree as many others in the food space. And these skills were born of necessity during enslavement, but they became important tools to help support their families, communities, became a skill. And because of the skill and culinary innovation, let me say that again. Because of their skill and culinary innovation, these recipes, like they're in the country, and we're still talking about this stuff today, you know? So it, I, it's important, and I really, really wanted to, like, again, demystify
Yeah.
that those myths, right? Like, no, fried chicken is probably one of the most important things. Now that after reading this and digging a little deeper, man, that's one of the most important things in American history.
And
Absolutely.
it to me, that's American food. So like you go to a restaurant, you're like, okay, American fare, American cuisine. I'm like, what is that? To me,
Hmm.
it's all that. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's soul
Yep.
food. That's American. Like all this other stuff, hot dogs and burgers and whatever else, that's all fine. To me,
Yeah.
American food is soul food.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Indeed.
Agreed.
Indeed.
Agreed.
Well, JR, Ebony, do you guys have any final thoughts? Again, Ebony, thank you for joining us. Any final thoughts you'd like to
Yeah.
share on
Thank you
this
for
episode?
having me. Y'all keep doing good work. I can't wait to come back and listen to more episodes and like found myself a third co-host on occasion.
Okay.
All
Whenever
right,
invite
You heard
into
it
the
here.
show.
You heard
indeed.
it here.
That's right. We are definitely going to do a full
Councilwoman
episode.
Johnson is going to be on some more episodes.
I'm
Yeah,
just gonna
Indeed.
bogart my way into the
we
studio.
would love it. We would love it.
Absolutely. Well, folks, you can find us on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon. As I've mentioned, we are now on Traverse TV. That is a new streaming platform. It is the Live All Good channel. You can find that on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire. You'll also find our video episodes on YouTube as well. Live All Good. Uh, I have appreciated both of you for this episode, and I look forward to many other episodes. I can't wait for the episode that we do on Africa Town. I'm excited about that because, yeah,
They're going to be
we're going
yeah, there might be
we're
some
going to bring the
tears.
heat.
I'm just going to
We're,
say. I'm just going to
we're
say.
going to
I
bring the
can't
heat.
wait. I can say that with fall semester starting up almost
Mm.
imminently, it feels like.
Oh.
We might have to do some work to kind of figure out scheduling for that,
Yes.
especially for the professor and maybe if some students
Sure,
make it.
I love it. We'll make it happen.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, it has been the latest episode of Moving with the Needle. You know where you can find us. Now, apparently, we got a new third co host. It's all good. Until next time, this is Lee, JR, and Ebony, Madam Councilwoman, signing off.